I decided to fishbowl the Prelude. Took the tint off. It was looking pretty rough. The back windshield tint was terrible from the start. And now that we're getting into some cooler weather here, I figured it was a good time to just pull it off, make one more step closer to refreshing this car, and borderline restoring it. I guess we're almost getting to that point. Unfortunately, I need to take a bit of a hiatus from the Prelude because I need to put a new power steering rack into the Toyota Tacoma. It finally came in today, a new Toyota OEM. Rack and pinion looks great, and that's what we're doing. We're gonna put this thing up on jack stands, and I'm gonna do my best to swap out the rack. It shouldn't be that hard because I've already done steering rack bushings, which were basically half the job. So all I have to do now is actually just replace the rack itself, and wish me luck. I just went to jack up the truck, and my U-joint in between this handle and the jack itself, it'll still lift, but it's that U-joint that spins to release it back down. There's a pin in there that is severed, and it seems like everything's a little bit out of place. So there it is, the severed piece. I'm not sure if I can maybe just stick something through there to try and get it to work. I also noticed it's kind of leaking some fluid, and I think that's because the joint is not seated where it's supposed to be. So, gotta figure this out, I guess. Here's that little piece that severed off inside there. Some sort of a pin that no longer really exists. Here is the fix for now. It's gonna be the biggest cotter pin I have. It's a bit long, so I may need to trim it down. Okay, well, it's through, and it seems to be doing what it's supposed to do now. I think I can rely on that at least to get me through this project. Now, before I take the wheels off, I want to make sure that they're dead straight and the steering wheel is straight, and I need to lock the steering wheel in place. It looks close, but it's not perfect. The steering wheel is straight. That is what is important. And I'm gonna go ahead and either try and lock it with the actual security lock if you've noticed when you go to turn it so much after the car's been shut off, it eventually kind of clicks into a locked position. I'm gonna try and achieve that dead center if I can. If that doesn't work, I'm just gonna use the seat belts, wrap it around the steering wheel, clip it into the seat belt clip, and then pull the seat back to put some tension onto it, and it should work. Yeah, it's really tight. Okay. Both of the skid plates are a little damp. This one is in this corner, and this one is literally got a layer of fluid, ATF, from the power steering rack dripping onto it. So really prevalent leak going on here, and it's all coming from right in here. If you look in through there into the power steering rack, where the steering shaft goes down into the rack itself, that bushing there, I don't think it's leaking from the lines. It very well could be, but it's definitely leaking from that bushing. At least that's what I think. Upon further inspection, my sway bar end links are looking to be in rough shape. That bushing, it's even worse on the other side, but it's crumbling apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the sway bar off. I don't know if you really need to, but it will buy some valuable space. Plus, I'm gonna go ahead and replace the sway bar end links while I'm at it. So to get the sway bar link off, it's a 15 mil nut on top, and then you have to use a 14 mil wrench to hold this in place. Otherwise, the whole thing will spin on you. So hold it in place with this and then twist off on top. Oh, this washer is absolutely wrecked. On both the passenger and driver side, I managed to remove the outer tie rods and the end links for the sway bar. It's kind of a pain. Also, I want to make a note here. Before I removed the outer tie rods, I marked the locking nut and the threads that it matched up to. So that way, when I go to put it back on, I can kind of mimic those marks and get the alignment fairly close. And as a backup, I also counted how many spins it took to undo the outer tie rod from the inner tie rod on both sides, and I marked those down. So I think the passenger was 15 spins and the driver's side was 17 or 18 spins. 18, because I wrote it down. The part that's in focus that looks like a shiny silver puck, that's the steering column coming down into the power steering rack. And basically had to take out the two 12mm bolts and nuts that hold that together. Now yours probably doesn't have that silver puck. Mine has it because I have a 1-inch body lift on this truck. So that's the 1-inch spacer for the steering column. I managed to get all of the bolts that hold on the power steering rack to the frame. And now the power steering rack is loose by hand. I can just move it around a little bit. I left one bolt in, the longest one, so that way I can pull the rack out from the frame a bit to make getting the hydraulic power steering lines off of the rack a little bit easier. That's gonna be a 17mm flare nut wrench. If you peer into the driver's side wheel well near the power steering rack, you'll notice these two hard lines, these hydraulic lines. I pulled the rack far enough out to clear the frames, that way I can put a wrench on those. And this is gonna be a flare nut wrench. Make sure you use one of these, not just your regular open-ended wrench, because this gets you a lot more surface area around that hardline nut, and you do not wanna strip that out. It's gonna be a bad time and you're gonna have to replace the entire hardline. And on today's episode of Learn from Connor's Mistakes, I'm gonna go over everything that happened yesterday. Now I ended up taking the sway bar off entirely to make more room for moving things around in there. And when I took it off, I actually ended up breaking the head off of one of the bolts. So this guy here is now permanently stuck in, and I've had to order a new bracket. I tried drilling it out. I was going to try and use a screw extractor to get it all the way out, but at this rate, the new part is 13 bucks, so I'm gonna get a new one. This bolt's still in decent condition. I did go out and find a new bolt and washer that'll fit the new one on this side. So that was my first strike. Now, when I left you guys, I think I'd mentioned to use a flare nut wrench to get your brake line or your hydraulic lines off, which you can see here on the new one. So this is the driver's side most line, and then you have another line that plugs in there. And on the driver's side most line, please listen carefully here. There is a hose with a simple clamp on it. You just pinch it, pull it back. You can slide the hose off of this piece, remove the whole rack and pinion, and then you can just put a socket on this and get that off. But what I did was use the proper tool, which was technically a flare nut wrench. I used the right size and everything, and it still rounded off that nut. So not much I can do about that now. I got it perfectly seated onto the new rack, but I reached out to Toyota to try and get a new one. They said I had to buy the entire assembly, which is $600. So I'm gonna make use of this one. I used the socket to get it really nice and tight, even though the nut is kind of screwed up. It's on there really well. But should I ever have to change this again, it's gonna be a pain. And then lastly, I had to remove the rag joint, and this was that spacer I was talking about that is specific to my truck because I have the body lift. If you don't have a body lift, you probably don't have something like this. So got this off the rag joint, which is on the steering column. It was a huge pain to slide this up and off of the old rack and pinion. It's basically going to seat onto this up here like that. But it was a huge pain to get off, took me a while. Just want to call it for the day after that. Today, I'm really hoping to get the rack and pinion back in, get everything situated, bleed it with new fluid, and the only thing I won't be able to do is put that second sway bar clamp on, because that one I'm gonna have to wait until it comes in the mail. Not much I can do about that, but I can possibly even use one bolt on the old one for now. I'm not sure I'm gonna drive the truck, although I'd probably be fine without a sway bar entirely. Needless to say, I'm gonna be just waiting on that piece. So today I wanna get the rest of the project completely done and hopefully get this thing at least drivable. I almost forgot to give this to you guys. These are Moog sway bar end links. There's the part number on there for you. Would have gone with Toyota, but they're about 60 bucks a pop, and I wouldn't have been able to get them in time, or at least not as quickly as I could get these ones. And with their sway bar end links, like, it's not as big of a deal as like your lower ball joint. So I'm okay running these Moog ones. I do have a Toyota OEM steering rack. I don't know if I mentioned that. This thing is a pretty freaking penny, I'll tell you that much. But it is OEM Toyota. I think the stamp is on this side. There's our little Toyota stamp. So it is an OEM steering rack and should last a long time. So I need to make sure this new rack is perfectly centered before I install it. Because if I install it without checking it, like right now, this side looks shorter than that side. If I bolt it up that way, and then even though I calculated my outer tie rods correctly, the whole thing's gonna be shifted a bit. So my goal is to get it as close to as it was before as possible. And that means getting this thing dead center. So what I'm gonna do is take some grips. Without gripping the threads, I'm just gonna clamp on lightly to the top. And what I'm gonna do is go full rotation on one side until it stops. Okay, so now we are fully that way. This side is fully sucked in. So now we count how many turns from this point. So it's 1, 2, 3 and a half. So 3.5 turns to get us all the way to lock the other way. So I just need to divide that by 2, which is 1 3/4. So we need to go back 1 3/4 turns. So we're gonna go 1 3/4. And you know what, just to be safe, I'm gonna measure it with a tape measure, just to make sure we're at least pretty close. So I'm gonna measure from this inner washer out. It's 7 3/4 inch. Wow, it's almost dead on, 7 3/4 inch. So that's about as good for driveway mechanics as I'm willing to do it. New power steering rack is all bolted up. I've got the hard lines on, all of the mounting bolts for the rack done and torqued down. It's mostly 123 foot-pounds except for the drivermost bolt. That is 141 foot-pounds, I believe. Outer tie rods are in on both sides. I tightened everything down, torqued to spec. I think the tie rod castle nut right over there is about 67 foot-pounds. Put a new cotter pin in it, and we're moving on. Everything hooked back up. We've got end links back on. We've got outer tie rods. Sway bar is mounted, but still missing that one bolt off that one clip. But everything's tight for now. What I'm gonna do is start bleeding the system. So I'm gonna pop the hood, fill up the reservoir with fluid, make sure it's topped off. And with the reservoir open, I'm gonna turn the wheel lock to lock and see if some bubbles come out before we actually put the wheels back on and do a final bleed. Also at this point, we can go ahead and remove our seatbelt. Bring the chair back forward, undo that guy, and take that off. Well, fam, the truck is back together, except for that one bracket. The sway bar, it's on there with the one bolt, but I wasn't able to ever get that other bolt out. And just got an email saying that the new bracket that I ordered is on back order for potentially 2 to 3 weeks, maybe longer. So now I'm in a real predicament. I want to drive this truck. I'm not sure if I can. I know some guys that totally removed the sway bar to give it total, independent front suspension. I think that's the terminology I'm looking for. So I know guys that take the whole thing out. I'm not sure if it's going to be okay to drive it with one bracket on and half a bracket on the other side. It is mounted to the tie rod end links, so I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but just a little hesitant. I need to go get an alignment on this thing now, and I'm just trying to decide if I should go source this part somewhere, try and get a screw extractor to get that screw out, or I don't know, leave a comment down below what you guys think I should do in this situation. But thank you. If you stuck around this long in the video, I really appreciate it. And stay tuned for more stuff coming up, prelude things. Truck's gonna sit for a bit. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next one. Keep elevating, my friends. Adios.